The following podcast is a Dear Media production.
Welcome back to Relationsh. It's your host, Cammie Crawford. Today I am joined by one of my good girlfriends.
Hey, girl.
Dom Roberts, a content creator and one of the realest, just like on the web and beyond. I really, really love you.
Cammie, that's how I feel about you. And it's so wild because we're friends.
Yes.
And it's so great. I don't even know how to begin to explain just how much I love you.
I love you.
Because I adore you in every single way.
Likewise. I found you. When I found you. I found you in
You
the
found
abyss.
me. You found me in the mud and mire. Probably.
No, but basically, like during what I like to call the reprise of the Black Lives Matter movement.
I like reprise.
The reprise. Because I think a lot of people, especially non-Black people, think that the Black Lives Matter movement started last year, when in reality, that's not the case. I mean, the Black Lives Matter movement for me started in 1992 when I was born.
Period.
I feel like for everyone, like there's hundreds of years of history, thousands of years of history that go towards this particular movement. But the reprise happened last year when we saw a new wave of protests.
Yeah.
And that was when I found you and I found your content, because you just put things so effortlessly simple but so powerful in the social graphics and content that you were creating. And I was like, she gets it. But also she says it like how I would say it.
Yeah.
What sparked that? Like, what made you want to start even making the content in the first place? Because that's laborious work.
Yeah. And so that's what's really interesting is I made the majority, I would say probably 85% of those graphics on my phone.
Yeah.
Like
Canva?
It was actually Fonto.
Oh, yes.
But I was making those on my phone, and which is really crazy because I feel like during that time period, also a lot of other like graphic designers were like, wow, this is so moving, blah, blah, blah. Like, tell me about your methods. What was this overlay? I'm like, bro, this was on my phone.
Yeah.
But I was like, shout out. Yeah, so I think really it just came from a place of, I feel like during that time, a lot of us had a lot to say.
Yeah.
Especially the Black community, of course. Hello. And I definitely found myself in a place where I was not able to stay silent. Like, how could you?
Yeah,
it
was impossible.
It was really impossible. And every day I was either feeling some type of emotion, outrage, or in some reflective period of thinking about everything that was happening. And I had so much to share. Right. And for us, I think, anyone who's Black, you see things that happen and it's common sense. It's like,
yeah.
Oh, it's just duh. Hello. Yeah. You don't see it like that. And I was coming to the realization that so many people don't see it like we do because they don't live through it.
Right.
And so I found myself at the crossroads of, okay, and at the same time, I say this very carefully because I don't want anyone to mistake my words as, oh, Dom says that she was kind enough to help people, so other Black people need to be kind enough to like help me understand too, because that's not what I'm saying.
Right.
I offered myself to be in that position, so don't go up to a Black person and be like, anyway, so you need to teach me. No.
Can you help me with this?
Yeah, don't do that.
Yeah.
That ain't it. But I did find myself at a crossroads where I was like, okay, I have all this knowledge, resource, and moxie to share with everyone around me. Do I internalize or do I help people move forward? Because I just kind of came to the realization that the only way to help people, specifically white people, learn is to teach them.
Right.
Most basic, baseline simple.
Right.
But it really did help a lot of people. Yeah. And was the progress that I wanted to see? In ways, yes. And in ways, people are still learning. And I think it also taught me a lot about myself and just the world in general and humanity is we're all on this journey of learning. And so it gave me a lot of grace for people to just be like, oh, okay, cool. You're willing to try. I'm into that.
Yeah.
Instead of living in the bliss of ignorance.
Right. Because that's a dangerous place to be.
The most dangerous place to be.
I think it's funny when you talk about like the baseline things, because I was getting so many texts from my white friends. Shout out to y'all. You know,
Y'all know who y'all are.
Y'all know who y'all are. Because here's the way that I saw it, because, you know, I was doing some work myself with, you know, getting the word out on through social media, especially. I didn't actually attend any protests because, frankly, I was too fucking scared to even go.
We're like public enemy number one.
Exactly. Like target on our backs every day. So
Exactly.
putting myself in the position to actually attend something like that where we didn't know what the fuck was going on. We didn't know who was coming for us. Like it was too scary for me. So I was like, you know what? I feel the most comfortable and the most powerful online and like using my presence there to educate people, because obviously through my work on Catfish and then other things I've done in my life, I have a pretty mixed fan base. The people who are listening to this podcast right now aren't all Black people.
Yeah.
And they don't know what they don't know. And so for me, I would get messages all the time from, you know, my brothers and sisters in the Blackness that were like, girl, why are you educating these people? Like, why is it our responsibility to keep educating people? They need to go and find the information themselves the same way we can. But I'm like, I get that, but we come from a different place. We come from a lived experience.
Yeah.
And that is completely different than leaving these people up to their own devices, which we have done for centuries. And look where the fuck they're at. The same place they started, child. Help them out.
What's so funny about that, too, is for me, so many people were saying that to me, too. It's like, oh, it's not your job. It's not your job. And I was like, well, really, there's two options. They're going to end up on the weird side of the movement, the weird, like, 1% of Black people who are like, what about Black aborted babies, blah, blah,
Yes.
blah, blah.
Oh, my God.
You know,
oh my
like,
God. Oh my God.
that side. And it's like, I'd rather steer them in the right direction of this is how you can champion a cause, like, that involves you being a part of the solution, instead of that weird side that's like, well, it's Black people's fault, and what about Black aborted babies? Because that was where I was seeing a lot of people going because there was a lack of resource. And I say this very carefully again, but kind of grace to be like, here's grace to learn, because I think a lot of people in our community were just really angry, and rightfully so.
Yeah.
So why would the day-to-day average person have the patience to talk to someone?
Right.
And I found myself with the patience to do it.
Yeah. What is your sign?
I'm a Capricorn.
The grounding sign. That makes sense. I figured you were an earth sign just because of the patience that it requires to take on this task, because it's a laborious task.
Yeah.
Like, and I know we've talked about it, like you've been affected by the work that it takes to even do that kind of stuff and put yourself on the front lines, basically, of the social media verse, which is already not forgiving. And then when you have like an election year and all kinds of other crazy shit happening in the world, and race relations and tensions are so high.
Yeah.
How did you cope kind of with the aftermath of putting yourself out there to be an advocate just like by chance?
Yeah, it was weird, because 2020 for me was like what people spend 5 years creating, like creating on the internet, I did in 1 year.
Yeah.
So it was a very fast-tracked experience.
Right.
And so at the end of when things started to like calm down and like Biden's in office and like the horizons were looking more hopeful, I kind of found myself in this weird place of really empty, just really, 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 really empty.
Like, what do I do now?
Yeah,
kind of thing.
because I'm just like, okay, well, things are gonna get better, and in ways they have gotten better. And I was like, okay, I also am really drained by I talked about this for a whole year straight, and I feel like I talked about everything as much as I could, sharing like my own experiences, helping people share their own experiences. And I found myself just honestly in a place where I was so like mentally detached as well from who I actually was. I found myself more as of like a machine of getting information out there and someone who was very reactive to information. And so I think I kind of started to deal with a crisis identity of, oh, okay, oh, this happened on the news. Oh my, get out my computer and, oh, who do we need to call? What do we need to do? And yes, in ways, I'm still very reactive because there's time and place. But then there were also other crises happening in the world that people now had this expectation for me to speak on or create for or say something. And I felt like I couldn't speak because, you know, the things that were happening in the U.S. regarding race, I lived that.
Right.
So it was, I can speak on that any day, anytime, any moment. But now we're talking about things happening in like other countries,
right?
In a world that I'm not a part of, in a culture I'm not a part of. Yeah. But now having this new expectation of like, well, you need to do something about it because you did something about it in the past. And I think I kind of got bitter.
Yeah.
Towards activism.
Yeah.
And it was really hard for me because I love activism. I love what it means. But then I think people started to look to me as like a news source and a resource, and I'm not that. I'm really a person. I'm really like goofy, and honestly, I'm not that serious at all. But I felt like when everyone was in contact with me, just based off of how they were like, I was being perceived online, they thought it was like this really serious, like, let's talk facts, let's talk change, let's talk curing cancer. And and I was like, I don't know.
Because you're how old?
I'm 23.
Oh.
And so
I was 23 once. Shoot.
Okay, Cammy.
Yeah.
And so I think I found myself with a mental crisis.
Yeah.
Of, like everyone did, where I was just like really sad, really depressed. I felt like no one wanted to... The only time people wanted to interact with me or interact with my content was when I was like putting myself on the line for like the expense of depressing shit happening in the world. And I think now on the other end, I've kind of put my foot down in the sense of like, it's who I am. Yeah. Of course I'm going to talk about it. Of course I'm going to lead people in the right direction. If there's something that happens, we're raising awareness. Like I'm a conduit of change, of course, all of those great things, but at the same time I'm also a person, right, with so many different facets to myself. So for the sake of my mental health, I kind of had to put my foot down, and I was like, yeah, I'm not crushing out 13 graphics a day and not eating and sleeping 2 hours and on the phone with like different people trying to figure out how I can help and how I can be a part of change, but really just like, okay, I live it out day to day. Yeah. And I also do other things too. And it's been hard because I've definitely seen like a dip in just how everything performs, just being like brutally honest. Yeah, of course. But yeah, just even losing like, I recently lost like almost 10,000 followers.
Shut the fuck up.
Yeah, just like, and it's happened I know the exact moment when it started happening because it's when I put my foot down.
When you made that post and you were like, I am not CNN, like I am not a news source. I am a person who is like taking on this work, but like, don't be coming at me if I post a funny TikTok.
Yeah, or like posting my outfits. My God, I'm so sorry that I also love fashion. Yeah. But so that was like a hit, like a blow to my ego, and kind of put in like this fear factor of like, oh shit, like what if like people stop like fucking with me and like brands don't want to work with me anymore and like all this stuff, and what if this now what do I have to do? And I was just like, bro, stop. Yeah. Like stop thinking like that. Yeah. Like okay, people are gonna leave. Things are going to change, but like the work that you did, like that's everlasting. Right. And it's still who you are. You just took a step back. And I think not letting like social media and like the comparison bully like get me down, because there's other friends that I made during the time and their content's like skyrocketed and they're still doing it. And I was like, oh, why couldn't I just keep doing it too? But I'm like, it's okay. I'm just I'm different. Yeah. And honestly, the average person can't keep going like that. No. And that's okay.
Well, if we think about, like, I don't even know if I properly introduced what you've done, because I feel like it speaks for itself. I'm definitely going to do like an intro so people who are listening will understand better. But like, I feel like everyone had that experience over the past year of like burnout, and there was so much information that we were consuming. You were someone who was consuming the information and educating people on the information and answering questions about that education and about that information, and that is even more consuming. And it's like, if you kept going down that path, yeah, some people are able to do it and some people are able to separate, but like, there is something to, I'm assuming that you are very much like an empath as well.
Hardcore.
Yeah, I think that's why we connect.
Yeah.
So I feel like even for myself, like when I was speaking about things and then I would talk about something else, people would be like, why are you talking about The Bachelor? Like, don't you see what's going on in Ethiopia? Don't you see what's going on in Nigeria? There's shit going down in Afghanistan, and like, why aren't you speaking on that? And I'm like, I was watching Hulu. Like, I just came here to talk about a good show that I like.
Exactly. And it's given me like almost, I have like yesterday when Instagram shut down. Yeah. Was the most calm I felt in a really long time, because I kind of have anxiety when I open the app. Yeah. People are like, well, just leave. I'm like, shut up. Yeah. It's my job.
Yeah, exactly.
But in all seriousness, I still to this day have this like almost like Sunday scaries, like anxiety when I open the app, because I know that people have this expectation. Yeah. And every time I post like, oh, I'm at a show or I'm doing something else, I feel like I'm almost letting them down. But at the same time, it's like, yo, I need to be at peace with I need to find like peace somehow. And I also want you guys to know that I'm just like a freaking person. Right. And yeah, at the end of the day, okay, maybe, yeah, same. I love talking about The Bachelor and like all that stuff. Sometimes I don't want to dissect why the franchise needs work. Yeah. Sometimes I just want to watch the show and tell you who should be taken off and who they should choose, and that's on that. Yeah. And so, yeah, it's weird. It's definitely this weird thing because it's new. This wasn't, I don't know, there wasn't really a type of creator like me that came out. Yeah. It came out of like 2020, and now there's kind of like a group of us. But I think me putting my foot down and deciding to take my content a different direction has been scary because, I don't know, clearly I'm seeing like how people feel about it, and that's scary, but at the same time, I don't know, I believe in myself and I believe about the other stuff I have to post about. Yeah. And it's equally just as good. Okay, yeah, maybe period. It's not as resourceful, but do you want to know where I got these shoes?
Yeah, exactly. That's resourceful.
Don't look at me weird. Don't look at me
resourceful. Weird. But I will say, like, would you say the other creators that have been doing similar work, are they Black creators?
Yeah, I would say some of them are Black creators. Some of them are just like in the BIPOC margin. Some of them just run like big accounts, and I look up to them so much. We're in like a shared group chat, and they like just kind of like toss content around and stuff. And I sometimes even feel guilty because I don't interact as much. Yeah. But I think it's because I really don't have the capacity like I once did. I think in 2020 I stepped up because no one else did. And now I'm kind of taking a step back because there are a lot of amazing people doing the work. Yeah. And like, if you want your everyday content, there's so many people you can follow, big and small creators too. I just don't think I will ever operate in that capacity again, because really it was just a very traumatic experience. Yeah. A beautiful experience that I think led so many people to have great conversations with friends and family, like lead to their own self-realization. But I think I can't be a part of that conversation like I once was.
Right. No, I totally feel that, because even in, like I said, my own DMs, like I'm helping people all day talk to their family members about race. And I'm like, like, that's what this episode is all about, just in case you didn't see it by the title. Today's episode is talking to your family about race. But at the time, a year ago, like if you would have asked me to have this conversation a few months ago, I'd been like, oh no, like I can't.
I literally can't. Yeah.
I literally can't.
I can have this conversation also with you.
Right. Exactly. Because it is an emotionally taxing conversation. It's an emotionally taxing topic. And, you know, when I started this podcast and when I decided I wanted to do this podcast, this was a conversation that I was like, it has to happen or I'm not doing a podcast.
Period.
Because relationship is not just about romantic relationships. This is about like real conversations and relationships that we have with ourselves, with our families, and people that we care about and people that we're trying to navigate our relationships with. And one thing that I have noticed a lot, and I'm sure you have too over the past year, 2 years, is that relationships have really been tested by the climate, the social climate that's happening, political climate. Every fucking thing is a topic of conversation at the dinner table at this point. Like,
yes,
everyone is talking about these things, and it's overwhelming for everyone still.
Yeah, and we saw people with like in their truest form.
Yes.
In 2020.
For better or for worse.
For better or for worse. In their truest form. And before we were operating in a very just surface level society where we just, you know, see each other. Oh yeah, I work with Craig. Mm-hmm. Whatever he does with his family, he does on the weekend. But at work, he's chill.
Yeah.
And then you're seeing like all these very hot, divisive topics coming up. And you're seeing now Craig sport his Make America Great Again hat. And you're like,
fuck Craig.
You're like, fuck Craig. Craig, I'm kidding you. You're going to strangle him across from the table. Just You're about to sending him personal messages in Zoom like, I hate you. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But it's very divisive and very hard. And how I feel about this conversation has changed so much because I've had to learn a lot about navigating relationships. Yeah. Because a lot of the times this is very counterculture. And I don't know, I might get shit for this. I don't really care.
Girl, fuck it.
Yeah, but in my eyes, you can't just, oh yeah, F them. Y'all, you saw that? You saw what they put? Oh, they're done.
Okay, we're the same. I feel the same way.
I feel the same way because, yeah, there's some people I'll see that and be like, okay, that ain't it. But, yo, you were a huge part of my life and you're actually a good person and your family took me in when I was a teenager and I know that you guys mean well, but maybe you're ignorant. I can work with that.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
No, 1,000%.
Because relationships take work.
Right.
No matter what they are. So I think this new cultural phenomenon that we have of, oh yeah, you saw that? Yeah, we don't talk to them no more. Yeah, because I saw that too. I unfollowed them.
They're canceled.
They're canceled. They're done. And yeah, time and place. I'm not scared to do that either.
I've done it plenty of times.
I've done it plenty of times
over the past year.
But I mean, for like, okay, it's Thanksgiving, and you got like racist Uncle Bob across from you, and he's not going anywhere because he's a part of your family. What do you do? Like, there's so many different layers, which is why I'm excited to talk about this with you. Because, okay, yeah, unpopular opinion, but you might not just be able to quit a relationship because you don't agree with them.
Right. And I have a hard time, and I think I spoke about this on social, but like it was such a fucking crazy time that it was like anything that's not 1,000% on one side was just like nobody wants to hear it. But I have an issue with labeling someone as a racist for doing something that is ignorant at one particular moment. It doesn't mean that they are a racist. I think that is like a strong term. They did something that was racially insensitive and definitely is received as racist.
Yeah.
But it doesn't make them a racist. I think that's like a more active job, and I still think that there are some people, there are people in our own families and lives, black, non-black, BIPOC, whatever, who say ignorant, racist shit.
Yeah.
Are they racists? I think I would have to have a little bit more of like a conversation
yeah.
and more context to like put that label on someone, because there are racists. There are racists.
Yeah, I think about it like this too. I do stupid shit all the time.
Yeah.
I'm not stupid though.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I do stupid shit, but I'm not stupid.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think the same way with like labeling someone racist. Okay. They must be racist.
Yeah.
Like if someone's like, oh yeah, they're racist, I'm like, oh, I don't want to be near them.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, like you said, that's a very active term. Like you have to constantly be racist to be racist to me.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh yeah, they racist. Like
Yeah.
it's very active. But someone who, okay, you said something, maybe you didn't say it the best way, or you did something and it was insensitive.
Right.
Yeah, okay, maybe those were racist things you've done or said, but I don't think that, like, okay, throw away the whole person now.
Right.
And that's the problem with this conversation, too, is a lot of the time we want it to just be one way. It's just a one-way going conversation. It's very linear. And this conversation is not linear.
Yeah.
It's very gray. It's not black and white. And yeah, there are things that are very black and white. But for the most part, navigating this is very gray. And a lot of people don't like to admit that. But the gray area is how you see progress. Like, gray is progress.
Yeah.
Black and white, more likely than not progress. Because even people who I agree with but are very black and white and there's only this is the right way all the time, I'm like, well, I don't know if I agree with that all the time.
Yeah. And I also acknowledge the fact that I come from a place of growing up in a predominantly white suburb,
Same.
like going to PWIs, predominantly white institutions, and like I grew up with these people who were at a house party and like the N-word comes up in a song and everybody's saying it and I'm looking like, oh, that's uncomfortable for me. And they're like, no, like, Cammie, we love you. Like, what do you mean? We would never say that about you, dude. And I'm like, you know what? Like, I know that you don't mean it in that way.
Yes.
But let me break it down to you why that's offensive. I wouldn't have done that at that time.
Of course.
But now where I'm at in my life, of course. Like,
Yeah.
I'm going to check you on that, but I'm not also going to think that Michael from, the 8th grade is racist because he used the N-word in a song. Like, I think now we can have these kinds of conversations, but last year it was like they said the N-word, they're racist, cancel them, take away all their shit and like get them out of here.
Yeah, because my question is, okay, do you only want people who are right and have never like messed up around you? Like, is that the goal that you're looking for? Because if that's the goal,
Yeah.
let's start cranking it out.
Right.
I really think, though, and this is something that I don't think is said enough, but I think all those people, especially the white people, that got really loud about this, like, cancel.
Oh my God.
I really think that was kind of, what's the word? Like a compensation. You're really lucky. And it's so funny because there was actually this girl who I grew up with. Like, we grew up together. I've known her since first grade. And we, like, first grade all the way through high school. But we, like, lost touch. And then during everything last year, she, like, found my Instagram and we kind of reconnected. And she messaged me and was like, I hope there was nothing I ever did that, like, hurt you.
I hated
blah, blah,
having
blah,
those
blah.
conversations over the past
And what's
year.
so funny and what she literally does not know was my first ever, in my, like, the first day I'm conscious as a little being, what my first racist interaction was literally with her.
She did something racially, like, insensitive towards you?
Yes.
Oh, fuck.
And it was, like, the most traumatic. It was, like, that happening was the first time my dad had to talk to me about race. Like, we're a black family.
How old were you?
I was 6.
Was this in Texas?
No, this was in Arizona.
Arizona.
Yeah.
Moment of
Yeah, and, and she doesn't remember that.
Do you think she doesn't remember that? You think she was giving that apology as like, I know it was this, probably, but like, sorry about it anyways?
Maybe, but honestly, I've come to realize that a lot of them don't remember. Because it doesn't...
Yeah.
You know that one
Yeah.
TikTok audio? It was like, I don't remember your trauma.
Yes.
You're like,
Yeah.
well, for you, it was a Wednesday, and for me, it was really traumatic.
Yeah.
And I was
No.
like, yeah.
Literally. I think we've all kind of had experiences like that. Like I can remember because my family is mixed, but my parents are black. And like growing up in PWIs, and I'm lighter skinned, it was like, Cammie, but like you're like more white than black, right? And like me being in like elementary school, like, yeah, totally, because that's what you have to do to like assimilate. Whereas now I'm like, I'm black, black, bitch.
Yes.
Period. But like you do what you have to do to kind of like survive in certain moments, hence code switching and everything. Because like, you know how we get down.
Yes, we know how we get down. And that's the other thing too, that is another tension that's not really talked about ever. And I think a really important part of this conversation when it comes to talking about your friends and family about race is I did so much self-preservation. Even to this day, I still do it. And it's kind of a way of like blocking out a potential traumatic experience.
Yes.
It's just safer to do that. And so now it's like all of these conversations about like, okay, but speak up. And then there's the people who don't want to speak up because then that makes their experience either more harmful, creates more trauma for them. So I understand. And I also understand if like when it comes to your family members, sometimes it's just easier. Okay, fine, touch my hair.
Yeah.
Don't like, okay, but if you really don't want someone to touch your hair, like don't let them.
Yeah.
But like because I'm half black, half Asian, and sometimes my Asian family members will be like, oh, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, oh, whatever, I don't care.
Yeah.
And so you kind of have to like pick and choose your battles. And that's a hard thing with self-preservation too, is sometimes it can be really isolating and create like this false sense of identity of like you're constantly trying to figure out who you are. Because like for some people it's like so easy to be yourself around them.
Yeah.
And like other times you feel like you don't know yourself at all.
Yeah.
And that's a really hard tension to live in.
Right. Especially in mixed families. But I think a conversation that I think we can have now versus like last year is the kind of racial issues that stir up within our own communities.
Yeah.
Because it's not just white people, like, and that's something that I feel like we couldn't say last year because it was so like, no, like this is what it is and these are the problem. But like, we also have our own problems within our own communities. There are plenty of people within black communities that are racist towards Asian people or Hispanic people, and likewise in those communities, there are plenty of brown people who are racist towards black people, and like there is plenty of that.
There's a lot of prejudice.
Yeah, right.
Too. Like, I think that's the thing that I had. When I was like, okay, like how do we define racism? Because that was another thing I was like, okay, we need to be able to define it to like find a solution. And prejudice we have prejudice everywhere.
Right.
And in every community, in any socioeconomic, there's classism, so many different things, and those are all like a form of like prejudice. And within like our own communities, there's colorism, like we can break it down with a freaking whiteboard. You know, it goes into so many different spheres and one giant ass Venn diagram, really. Right. And I think also though to recognize that like racism it's like prejudice plus power too. So like recognizing that racism can't exist unless there's like power behind it, which is like, you know, like white people,
right?
They low-key built this shit,
right?
So.
Right.
But I think understanding prejudice and combating that is a great way to, you know, change your mindset. Because we all think shit. We all have intrusive thoughts like that we can't control. Like, I saw this TikTok the other day and it was like, have you ever just been like sitting in church and it's like hell, demons,
yes, me,
like F God, blah, blah, blah. And you're just like, oh my God, like I don't feel that way. Like, why am I thinking that? But very similar, if we want to get real, very similar in society. Maybe it's like even the movie White Chicks.
Yes.
Which I think is so hilarious.
I love that movie. They could never make that.
They
these
could
days.
never. Yeah. No, never ever in a million
No.
years. But like just that old like humor, like you'll see something and you'll think it and you'll be like,
Yeah.
that was a Prejudice thought.
You were thinking it.
You were thinking it. You said it.
No, it's so true.
But it's so true. But I think reflecting on those thoughts, understanding where they come from, and really like diving deeper than just allowing them to live in your mind is really the greatest way to unpack any racist or like prejudice like feelings you might have.
Right. Well, I think when this episode comes out, it's going to be around the holidays.
Yeah.
So people are going to be seeing those family members that they haven't seen since last Christmas, last Thanksgiving, and like having those conversations at that time versus this time. And there's probably high fucking tensions. I can only imagine what it's like for y'all, for the ally whites in your white homes at Thanksgiving next to that green bean casserole. I know shit was hitting the fan.
I know it was
year.
going down. And I just want to say shout out to you.
Shout out to you
for sticking through.
For holding it down, because I mean, I feel like we all kind of have these conversations, I feel like, at the Thanksgiving dinner table. Like, it comes up at some point.
Yes.
And sometimes you're in places where you feel totally comfortable. Like, my family, we have these conversations openly all the time. But some people, this is like still new for them to have conversations with their families about topics like race. And then you add on, the whole vaccine movement, and why it even has to be a movement. This is a pro-vaccinated podcast. I just want everybody to know. Vax and waxed, get your shit. But like those conversations.
We're at 42 minutes.
Oh, fuck. How so soon?
We just love each other.
Clearly. Okay. So all those conversations are going to be had, and like we want to help you to be able to kind of dissect them. And make it just like a smoother transition. I feel like at least right now, God willing, hopefully nothing horrific happens and in between now and the holidays. But I also I was saying this yesterday, I don't want for these conversations to only happen when something horrific happens.
Yeah.
We have to keep having conversations about this so that it's just like a normal thing. And it kind of like desensitizes it a little bit to where you can actually go up to your grandma and be like, hey, grandma, let's stop saying the N-word.
Yeah. Let's just stop doing it.
Let's just stop.
Because
So we have some questions from people. Okay, here goes the first one. I have 2 young nieces who are Black. I want to advocate for their future and being prepared financially, like having a retirement account, college fund, etc. My sister doesn't do anything like that for them. My dad, their grandpa, has always had the mindset of people, regardless of race, can do well for themselves if they want. So he doesn't acknowledge how even mortgage lending companies will hike up rates for potential homeowners if they were or are Black due to racial bias. How can I be the best advocate for my nieces and bring up this topic to ensure that they are prepared for their future, even though I'm just their aunt?
I actually have a great resource for this, and it's an incredible book that I read, and it talks about like racial, like the disparity, like the wealth disparity between like in the Black community, essentially, and how that came to be, because it wasn't always like that. But there's a very like clear point in history when that happened. The book's called Race for Profit, and anyone who's curious on how things like that, like mortgage lenders, why it's so hard for us to get housing, like there's a literal system built, all these things. Anyways, it's really great, very informative. But I'm like, can I just jump into?
Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna jump into it.
Dive right in, girl.
I think this is really huge and something that I'm eternally grateful that my dad like taught me when we were really young. I went to a predominantly white school too, and they had these things where you could set up a bank account, and the more money you put into savings at this bank account, you would get like prizes and shit.
Oh,
but yeah, I know. I was like, okay, period. But it taught me the lesson of like saving money, all of these things. And so I think the best way to really help your two nieces is to really just show them like financial responsibility, because that's a thing that I'm not afraid to call out, but we in the Black community have a really hard time sometimes because we don't have the best examples of financial responsibility.
Yeah.
It's very rare when you meet someone. Luckily for me, I was set up to be shown financial responsibility by my parents, but also like the families around me that didn't look like me. But if you grow up in places where there's not a lot of financial responsibility, like that's where I think a lot of Black people run into those issues, you know? And so I think that's the best way to show them. Also, that book is very eye-opening. And I always just like shop Black, like get a like if there's a Black financial advisor that you can get, like there's just so many things that can help, because this is like a huge thing on my radar right now, because it's so crazy to me. But yeah, I would just, there's so many resources for us, so I would like start with that book for yourself, like financial responsibility, but just being that example is so huge for them.
Yeah. And you are 100% right to be concerned, because that is a concern. Like for their grandfather, who may think, you know, there is a whole generation of white people, especially white Americans, that are like, I pulled myself up by the bootstraps, and like these things don't exist because I grew up poor. And it's like, okay, you grew up financially poor, but compared to a Black person and a white person walking into the same store, they could both be of the same socioeconomic class, or the Black person could have slightly more than you and still be treated worse than you based off of the color of their skin. So we have to kind of, it's not that we separate the two from like socioeconomic and color. But for Black people, you just have to understand that there's like an added layer of shit that is on us at all times, regardless of what the fuck we look like. I could come in the store, I could go a Chanel the fuck down, okay? Diamonds blaring, and they will still treat me differently. Yeah. It doesn't matter. I'm telling you that I'm not saying this is a hypothetical. I'm saying that this is what happens.
All the time.
I have walked into stores where I am shopping with my big ass fucking Chanel bag on that costs about $7,000, and a white girl will come up to me and ask me if I can get her this sweater in the color blue.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm also shopping. And literally this happened. And the girl was like, so you don't have it in blue? And I was like, bitch, I will fucking beat you with this Chanel bag. Stop playing with me. But you know, it happens. Like this is like a normal thing for our lives. And I think that like there's nothing wrong with setting up your nieces to succeed.
Yes.
Like that's a good thing. One thing that my parents did, which like my sisters and I are going to be the first generation of like generational wealth. Yeah. Most of us don't have generational wealth in the Black community. But my parents set up credit cards in our names from when we were like 3 years old, and paid it off, spent little amounts and paid it off, so that now I got great credit. Like things like that, maybe as an aunt you could probably do for your nieces.
Yeah. I think also I would even like that book, you could even maybe see if that's something like their parents would be opening to reading. Yeah. Because it really is eye-opening and like helps put things into perspective, because I think when it comes to those things, you could be like, oh, the system's against us, but also there's so many ways for us to be proactive towards the system to like benefit and create change. So I think it's a mix of like, okay, recognizing the problem, recognizing like, yes, the system has been built against us, but there are resources that can help us.
Some loopholes. Yeah. There's some loopholes. I think for anyone, if you're raising Black children or children of color, period, you have to recognize that it's going to be different for them than it is for you. Like that's just the way that it is, period. And it's better to just get ahead of it than to pretend like it doesn't exist. If you're going to be adopting Black children, if you're going to be having mixed babies with anyone, like this is a part of it. And no matter what they are. If they're Asian and white, they're still going to have different things going on in their lives than their white parent. Like that's going to be different for them. So just keep that in mind. Okay, for a few years now, I've been really interested in having more conversations with my family about race and discussing how we can recognize our privilege and use some of it to help others who are treated unfairly. But sometimes I feel like certain members of my extended family just don't care as much about it or even think about it. Is there a way to encourage someone to care about these topics more, or are these just the people that I shouldn't waste my time with to talk about this?
I think the beautiful thing is no one's a lost cause. No one is a lost cause. It just might not happen at the speed that you want it to happen at, because everyone's at their own pace and their own level. But throughout this past year, one thing that I have recognized is the more proactive you are and the more you are about like bringing things up, and it could be in creative ways. Like, okay, maybe around the holidays or when you see your family, you guys watch one type of movie. And instead you're like, oh, hey, what if we watch this movie? And there's some educational undertones to it. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Or even if around the holidays, like my family, like we like to get out and volunteer. And so maybe with your extended family, that's like something you guys do. Like you guys like to volunteer at like a soup kitchen or something. I don't know, during the holidays. But maybe it can be something a little more proactive and something that can just kind of like help them like shift and like see their perspective towards like, oh, like these are different people groups and like these are the disparities against them, things like that. But also just know that it's also on them. Like, you can only do so much in your power. You could try and get creative, try and show them different things and get them excited. But at the end of the day, people work at their own pace. And so if they're not too excited to learn or try and be different, just always leave the door open, I guess is what I'm getting at. Always leave the door open that, like, if they want it, you're there for them. And if they would like to know more or become more involved, great. But I don't think ever forcing or shaming something onto someone has never worked. Yeah, I've never seen like forcing like, oh, you don't care about black people? Yeah. You don't care about what's happening? Yeah. Like that never makes anyone feel good, and if anything, it makes them feel more defensive. So I would work more on the, oh, have you seen this movie or have you whatever. And yeah, just leave the door open.
Yeah. See, I tend to think that there are some people that are beyond reproach. Like some people, well, but not even that they're beyond what did you say? Some people are, no one's too far gone. No one's too far gone. I didn't think there are some people who are too far gone just for your own mental sanity. Oh, like sometimes, like obviously we know like silence is compliance in a lot of cases, silence is violence in a lot of cases, but there is also, I think, a time and a place where you can be like, you know what? Auntie Barb is not gonna fucking get it. And anytime I try to come at her with education and, you know, peace and try to really reason with her and like get her to kind of get on my level and understand something, I'm met with screaming, white tears, like crying, freaking out, and like yelling at me and barging out of the room. Okay, then maybe at some point, like after the 50th time, you're like, you know what? I'm just not gonna have these conversations with you. I think there's also something to being in those places with your family members, because I've been there too, because like I said, my family is mixed, and I'm talking to someone and it becomes so volatile that I say, you know what, actually, I'm not going to have this conversation with you because I can see that it's not going to progress in any kind of fashion, and I can see that you don't want to be educated about this topic, so why don't we move on? Yeah. Like there is something to switching gears and cutting somebody the fuck off. Yes. From that kind of rhetoric. Like you don't also need to take that on or hear that. If it comes to racial relations, if it comes to like homophobia, transphobia, xenophobia, anything like that, you don't have to take on that energy. Like at some point you have to know when it's okay to like tap out. Yeah. And that's kind of, I think the best way when it comes to any conversation is always have a goal. What's your goal? Is your goal education? Is your goal confrontation? Like what is your goal? And stick to it. And yeah, at the end of the day, like you are priceless in any situation. So make sure to protect yourself. Yes. Like if you realize the conversation's getting too heated, also like recognize who else is in the room and if that is bringing like discomfort towards them. And trauma. Yeah, trauma towards them. So just be very aware, but always have a goal. And usually when you have a goal going into a conversation, it like helps navigate the situation a lot better. Yeah, no, I totally agree. Can you also talk about, can white people experience racism and reverse racism versus being prejudiced? And how do we talk to our friends about this topic? I feel like I heard a lot about this over the past year because people were like, I was trying to have a conversation with my dad and he was like, that reverse racism is a issue too. And it's like,
Yum, 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 yum. This is what I was kind of saying earlier, but it is a literal equation. Racism is a equation.
Mm-hmm.
It's prejudice plus power.
Mm-hmm.
So we all have prejudice, but the power behind it, the system behind it that furthers the prejudice is what creates racism.
Right.
So white people in America have a system of power that they benefit from because of how this country was started.
Right.
Because of that system of power, any prejudice they feel towards other people is racism. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
That prejudice is backed by a power system, and that is racism.
Right.
And so where white people get confused is like, okay, if a black person says something about them being white and it makes them feel uncomfortable, okay, that's prejudice. Like, or maybe they don't like you, whatever the case is. Like you meet a black person, you're white, they just don't like you.
Yeah.
Right? That's prejudice. You're experiencing prejudice. But the black person who feels some type of way towards you, the difference is they don't have a power system behind them.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have a system of power that's so all day long they could throw stuff at you, say whatever they want, and it's not backed by anything. It's just backed by their feelings and emotions. When white people do that, why it's dangerous and why racism is more harmful than any type of prejudice is because it's backed behind power.
Yeah.
And I think having those two distinctions is huge in this conversation, and that's how you recognize privilege, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the system that you benefit from, that's where that power, that's where that privilege, that white privilege that we talk about all the time,
yeah, that's
where that comes from. We're not pulling that out of our ass. Like, it comes from a place.
And it's not like, I want for people to understand that it's not, we're not saying this in some kind of like judgment way. Like, this is not a judgmental statement to say that you have privilege if you're white. This is a factual statement due to history. Like, there's history here. There's actual facts here. There's a system in place, like you said, that has made it this way. It's not your fault.
No.
And honestly, there's nothing wrong with having privilege. I have privilege.
I have a ton of different privileges.
Right. Exactly.
Like, that I grew up with. And that's the thing, right? Like, there's not, white privilege is not the most powerful privilege in the whole entire world. But I will say that in a lot of cases, it comes into play. Mm-hmm. And I think the sooner you recognize it, and instead of it being like a blow, like you taking it personal and it's like a blow to your ego, a blow to who you are as a person.
Yeah.
And try and, if you haven't like seriously thought about what white privilege actually means, and if you are having the conversation about white privilege, which is such a hot button, like, that's the crazy. You want to see people get bugged? Say white privilege.
Yeah, exactly. Say it at Thanksgiving.
Yeah,
when
say
the
it at
turkey
Thanksgiving.
hits the table, be like, so white privilege, huh?
Yes. So I think there's also like a lot of different terms that you should. I think if you're able to define them, it'll help you have this conversation a lot smoother. A big thing that I would see, and I'm sure a lot of you guys listening are thinking about, but they're probably the first thing that I've heard a lot of white people say when you're like, oh, you have white privilege. I grew up poor.
Yeah.
Okay, you experienced classism, and I'm sorry for that, right? Like, eat the rich,
Yeah.
But
period.
But that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah.
So I think even helping people recognize, like, oh, that's actually called classism.
Yeah.
That you're talking about, and defining that. But what we're talking about is the socioeconomic, systemic system that white people created when they came to the United States and built this land. When they did that, they built a system that they benefit from, and we have yet to dismantle it. so it's still in power.
Right. And it affects everyone. It affects not just Black people. It affects Native people. It affects the indigenous. It affects Hispanic people. It affects Latinx people. I'm trying to make sure that I get every single category, you know.
Yes.
It affects Arab people. It affects brown people, South Asian people, everyone. It affects everyone.
Exactly.
And it's not your fault. You just literally got spit out of a vagina one day or stomach, whatever, and you were born. And like, that's what happened. And that's not your fault necessarily, but how you deal with it and what you do with it and how you make it work for others who don't benefit from the same privileges that you do is what we will judge you on.
Exactly. Because the likelihood of another white peer, like, I'm speaking specifically, I guess, right now to white people. A great way that you can use your privilege is through conversation. Mm-hmm. Because the likelihood of another white peer listening to you, when you bring something up, like, hey, that was wrong, like, kind of like speaking, because I guess a classic case is like, okay, if I were to say it to a white person, they'd be like, oh, you're just
being aggressive.
Yeah, you're being aggressive. You're so sensitive. Everyone's so sensitive these days. Mm-hmm. But if a white person were to say it, it's like, I know, we the same.
Yeah.
You know? So that's how that power dynamic and that you can start attacking the infrastructure of systemic racism.
Right.
In the context of conversation, through conversation.
Even if it's subtle. It could be the most subtle thing. Like, I remember even, wearing my braids on a filming situation one time, and one of the producers on set, white producer, was like, oh, you wore braids? Like, how is this going to look continuity wise? And another white producer was like, sweetie, Black girls could get braids, and another Black girl watching will know that she could have got that last night. Like, it doesn't take... it's not a mental gymnastics for Black people, that they'll get it. Like, you don't worry about that. And that meant so much to me, because I don't even think she knows how much it meant to me. But I was like, I couldn't have said that in that moment, because in that moment I was already feeling like, holy fuck, like, I have these braids, like, I've never really worn braids like that on camera, and like, this is gonna be my first time. What are people gonna think? Like, da 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 da. Like,
and there's already so much anxiety that us Black people feel when we change our hair.
Oh, that's gonna be a whole nother episode.
That's a whole nother episode. Prepare for that. Relationship with your hair.
Yes, exactly. No, it's so true. But like, even something like that can mean so much. Like, if you are in an all white conference room and everyone is white, being that one white person to be like, don't you think we should add some color to this situation? Like, even in the influencer world, like, you're on an influencer trip and there's no Black talent involved or invited, be like, have you heard of Dom Roberts?
Yeah.
She would be amazing to come on this trip with us. Like, something like that. Use your privilege for a benefit. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. So, I feel like this needed to be like a 10-part episode. Because we haven't even covered half of what I would have liked to.
And maybe it will be, Cammie.
Maybe it will be.
Maybe it's a 2-parter.
It might need to be.
For the holidays.
Because you guys need it. I need it. Like, it's hard. It is hard. And even when you're talking to your friends, like, we're going to do an episode about talking to your friends about race. And like, that's a whole other conversation, because while your family members are people that like you can't get rid of, you can kind of get rid of some of your friends. You can. I have. But I know how hard it is and how difficult it can be to have these conversations, especially when you've never had them before. So I thank you for coming here and helping us guide this ship along.
Cammie, thank you. This is the highest honor to be on Relationship.
Period.
I
love you. Thank you.
I love you so much. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Cammie Crawford, host of the Relationship podcast. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video and want to see more videos, click below to subscribe and like this video for more Dear Media content. So shut up and listen.